A man put $20 million in cash inside a glass box and set it next to a cricket pitch in London. He had a knighthood, a private bank on a Caribbean island, and 18,000 investors who trusted him with their savings. The cash was real, almost nothing else was. Allen Stanford was born in Texas, but the image he built was much bigger than that of a banker. Private jets, yachts, mansions, polished suits, and in 2006, a knighthood from Antigua and Barbuda, which let him walk around calling himself Sir Allen Stanford. The title wasn't honorary in a vague way. He had built Antigua's largest private employer, poured money into the island's economy, funded cricket stadiums, and made himself so central to the country that questioning him felt like questioning the island's prosperity. The Prime Minister attended his events. The regulators answered his calls. And when he walked into a room in the Caribbean, people treated him like he owned the place, because in a lot of ways he did. The banking operation had been taking shape for years. He started an offshore bank on Montserrat in 1985, moved it to Antigua by 1990, and turned it into Stanford International Bank. From there, the product was simple: certificates of deposit. CDs are supposed to be the most boring investment you can buy. Safe, predictable, the kind of thing you park your savings in so you can sleep at night. Only Stanford's CDs came with returns that were unusually strong and strangely smooth year after year, and the bank marketed them like it had discovered a secret formula for being safer than everyone else, while also paying more. His U.S. brokerage arm sold the CDs aggressively, especially from 2004 onward, targeting retirees, teachers, and small business owners, people who had done everything right and just wanted their money to sit quietly and grow. In 2008, when the S&P 500 dropped 39% and most investors were watching their portfolios collapse, Stanford International Bank claimed its portfolio lost just 1.3%. Think about that for a second. Every major fund on the planet was bleeding, and this offshore bank in Antigua barely got a scratch. That number alone should have been a fire alarm. Instead, it was a selling point. Over time, investors across more than 100 countries bought in, and the operation grew to roughly $7 billion. And then there was the cricket. In November 2008, he hosted the Stanford Super Series at Lord's, the most famous cricket ground in the world. The match was broadcast internationally. The $20 million cash box sat beside the pitch the entire time. Stanford brought players' wives and girlfriends to the ground and posed with some of them on his lap for photographs that made it look less like sponsorship and more like he owned the sport. Behind all of it, the bank's reported returns were fabricated. The assets were far riskier and murkier than advertised. And investor money was being mixed together in ways customers never knew about, tied up in risky investments that couldn't easily be sold, hidden loans to Stanford's own businesses, and Stanford's personal spending. Prosecutors later said more than $2 billion was siphoned off for jets, yachts, real estate, and luxury that had nothing to do with anyone's certificate of deposit. The whole thing depended on confidence staying alive. New money came in, old promises got covered, the image stayed glossy, and as long as enough people believed the statements, the engine kept running. The people who were supposed to stop it were paid not to. Leroy King, the head of Antigua's financial regulator, admitted to accepting over $520,000 in cash, Super Bowl tickets, and flights on Stanford's private jets, in exchange for ignoring what was happening inside the bank. When the SEC sent inquiries to Antigua, King let Stanford's own people draft the responses on official FSRC letterhead and send them back as if the regulator had written them. The man responsible for checking the vault was helping forge the receipts. Inside the company, the chief financial officer, James Davis, eventually said it plainly: "We falsified the numbers." He had been Stanford's associate for years, and when the time came, he told prosecutors exactly how the returns were invented, how the accounting was rigged, and how the image was maintained. Angela Shaw's family had invested millions in those CDs. They lost everything. She later said the only justice victims would ever see was a few pennies on the dollar. She founded the Stanford Victims Coalition because nobody else was going to fight for 18,000 people who had trusted a man with a knighthood and a bank that looked like it couldn't lose. Then 2008 hit the broader market and redemption requests started piling up. In early 2009, an outside analyst named Alex Dalmedy, a Venezuelan-American financial consultant who had been asked to look into Stanford by a friend, published a piece called DuckTales that laid out in plain language how bizarre the numbers looked. A bank that supposedly barely lost money in the worst financial crisis in decades. Once that analysis started circulating, the scrutiny got sharper fast. On February 17, 2009, the SEC charged Stanford and related companies with fraud. FBI agents raided the Houston headquarters. Assets were frozen. The sales machine that needed constant trust and constant inflows had the power cut. And right as the scandal was breaking, Stanford tried to run. He reportedly attempted to charter a private jet from Houston. The pilot wouldn't take his credit card. The man who had spent years flying around the Caribbean like royalty couldn't even book a seat out of his own city. He ended up turning himself in to the FBI in Virginia. His trial began in January 2012 in Houston. Prosecutors laid out the fabricated returns, the misuse of investor money, the insider testimony, and the lifestyle spending. Stanford maintained throughout that he had run a real business and was not a thief. On March 6th, a jury convicted him on 13 of 14 counts, including fraud and conspiracy. A few months later, the judge sentenced him to 110 years in federal prison, one of the longest white-collar sentences in American history. His appeals failed, and the conviction stood. Davis got 5 years after cooperating. Laura Pendergast Holt, the chief investment officer who admitted to obstructing the SEC investigation, got 3 years. 2 other executives got 20 years each. Leroy King got 10. As for the victims, 18,000 claims were allowed in the receivership. Court-appointed receiver Ralph Janvey spent years chasing assets and settlements around the world. By late 2018, about $500 million had been recovered out of roughly $5 billion in losses. That's about 5 cents on every dollar. Unlike Madoff's victims, Stanford's investors weren't eligible for SIPC insurance coverage, which meant there was no safety net, just a slow, expensive legal process, and the hope that somewhere, somehow, more money would turn up. Angela Shaw had it right. A few pennies on the dollar was all most people ever saw. Antigua revoked the knighthood. They took his name off the cricket grounds. The man who put $20 million in a plexiglass box to prove how real his money was ended up proving the opposite. Enjoyed this story? Leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. Now you know.